Have you ever felt that, despite all your efforts, something inside you remains silent, as if the world outside keeps moving, but your soul is stuck in a space between what you feel and what you try to hide? There is an invisible force shaping this inner world. It is not your willpower. It is not your intellect. It is your emotional energy. And while many talk about emotional control as if it were just swallowing anger, feigning peace, or smiling in the midst of chaos, the truth is different. The truth is that the greatest battle you will face will not be against the world. It will be against the thoughts you allow to live inside you. W. Clement Stone said that there is a power within you that can change the world, if it is guided by a positive mental attitude. But for many, this attitude is just a mask, because talking about emotional balance is easy. Living it is something else. Because most people do not control their thoughts. They are controlled by them, like a storm that arrives without warning and changes everything. It is at this point that Napoleon Hill's life becomes a map, a call, a mirror. One day, someone asked Hill, "Do you control your thoughts, or are they controlled?" And that question never left his mind, because until that moment, he also believed that thinking positively was enough. But it wasn't, because he understood that thought without direction is noise. Emotion without awareness is prison. Control without purpose is just repression. And in this silent field of the mind, where no one sees, is where the real war takes place. Most people live reacting. They react to traffic, to the words of others, to fear, to the lack of answers. This is reactive emotion. It is fast, intense, and almost always destructive. But there is another emotion, an emotion that does not shout, but directs, that does not explode, but guides. It is conscious emotion, and that is where the difference lies. The difference between being hostage to your mind or master of it. W. Clement Stone called this a bridge between what we feel and what we build. This bridge is called a positive mental attitude. But be careful, don't confuse it with superficial optimism, because there is a pain that most people carry and that no one sees. The pain of appearing strong, the pain of swallowing sadness, the pain of controlling everything on the outside, while on the inside, everything is falling apart. Men and women collapse in silence every day because they confuse control with suffocation. But true emotional control is not swallowing pain. It is looking at it with open eyes. It is naming the shadows. It is taking a deep breath when everything inside you wants to scream. Emotional control is a spiritual discipline. It is daily practice. It is reconnecting with the divine within you. It is not denial. It is presence. It is not anesthesia. It is awareness. Because only when you stop running away from your emotions does it stop chasing you. What you are about to hear is not a manual. It is not a ready-made recipe. It is a journey. A crossing. Let's walk inside the mind and heart of Napoleon Hill, and together reveal the secrets of true self-control. Not the self-control that paralyzes, but the one that liberates, the one that aligns, the one that heals. Because maybe what you call weakness is just misunderstood emotion, and maybe what you need is not strength, but direction. We will go through layers of illusion. We will dismantle inherited beliefs, and we will reconnect you with the most silent and powerful point of your being, your intention. This is the beginning. Breathe and move on. The invisible mistake, confusing self-control with emotional repression. At some point in your life, you learned that being strong was the same as not showing it, that holding back tears was a sign of maturity, that swallowing anger was nobler than facing it. And so, without realizing it, you began to build a wall between what you felt and what you showed. This wall gained layers of silence, of fear, of shame, until one day, what was supposed to protect began to imprison. Emotional repression is not the absence of pain. It is frozen pain. Pain without a voice. And the most dangerous thing is that it doesn't go away. It builds up. It vibrates silently inside the body. It turns into insomnia, into anxiety, into exhaustion that doesn't go away. The body feels what the mind denies, and it keeps everything you insist on keeping quiet. Every repressed emotion turns into vibrational tension, and this tension has a price. Napoleon Hill understood that self-control is not about putting emotions in a cage. It is about giving them direction, because what you feel has a purpose. It has an origin. Ignoring this is like trying to silence an alarm without putting out the fire. Many believe they are being strong when they do not show anything, but true strength is allowing yourself to feel without being dominated. It is not running away from anger, nor drowning in it. It is breathing within the chaos and choosing how to respond. This confusion between self-control and repression is subtle, but profound. It is in the phrases we repeat to ourselves. I am fine, when we clearly are not. This does not affect me, when everything inside us is boiling, and time goes by, and this emotional denial shapes our frequency. We become harder, more closed, more disconnected from our own light. When Hill talks about controlling the mind, he is not talking about suppressing feelings. He is talking about directing them, about welcoming the emotion, listening to it, and then guiding it. Because every feeling contains a message. Every discomfort points to something that needs to be seen. Ignoring this is living in a permanent internal war. It is building a fortress, and then realizing that you yourself have become trapped inside it. Being strong is not holding everything in. Being strong is knowing when to let go. It is recognizing that your value is not in appearing unshakable, but in being true. And if there is pain, let it be heard, because every repressed emotion comes back, and comes back stronger, and comes back in the form of imbalance. But when you choose to look at it, something changes. The vibration changes, and what was once tension begins to transform into clarity. And that is where true control begins. Not in denial, but in awareness. Not in repression, but in transmutation. This is the first step on the journey. Recognizing that perhaps what you called strength was just a fear of feeling, and that now it is time to go beyond. Why trying to think positive can worsen silent anxiety? There is a seductive idea spread throughout modern spirituality that all it takes is positive thinking to solve everything, that the simple act of thinking good thoughts is enough to ward off suffering, attract miracles, and heal pain. But behind this seemingly enlightened discourse lies a subtle trap, a trap that traps many sensitive souls in a cycle of guilt, silence, and frustration. When you try to force positivity into the midst of pain, something breaks inside. There is a huge difference between finding light in the darkness and denying that darkness exists. The mind can repeat affirmations, but the body vibrates what it truly feels. And the universe, which responds to your deepest vibration, not your superficial efforts, begins to reflect this internal conflict. You say you are fine, but you feel a knot in your chest. You say you are grateful, but inside you carry an emptiness. This dissonance between what you think and what you vibrate is one of the greatest sources of silent anxiety. Napoleon Hill never said to fake optimism. He talked about creating a mental state of clear purpose and heightened emotion, and that starts with emotional honesty. Trying to think positive while denying the pain only makes it hide even deeper, and the deeper it hides, the more strength it gains. Because everything that is not healed repeats itself. The mind that tries to avoid suffering ends up vibrating exactly it, because energy does not lie. Frequency does not pretend. There is a false spirituality that teaches us to swallow everything in the name of light, to smile when our heart bleeds, to be grateful when our body begs for rest. And that is not healing. That is exhaustion disguised as enlightenment. It is not about drowning in pessimism. It is about allowing the light to enter, not over the pain, but through it, because true light does not deny the darkness. It goes through it. You do not have to look good all the time. You do not have to vibrate joy when you are grieving. True manifestation happens when there is coherence between thought, emotion, and action. When what you say, what you feel, and what you do are aligned. And this is only possible when there is permission to be human. Hill knew this. And that is why he talked about mastering the mind, not to escape pain, but to not be a slave to it. The attempt to force a vibration that does not match your inner truth generates more pain, and this pain turns into anxiety, into a feeling of spiritual inadequacy, into a silent fear of being wrong, even in the way you feel. But you are not wrong, you are trying, and this is already part of the path. What needs to change is not what you feel. It is the space you give it for it to reveal itself, to be understood, and then transmuted. Thinking positively is not about denying pain. It is about choosing where to place your intention after recognizing what is alive inside you. It is about creating space for emotion to move, because emotion is just that, energy in motion, and all energy, when accepted, finds a new path. When denied, it creates blockages. When repressed, it becomes illness, but when felt consciously, it becomes wisdom. How Napoleon Hill used anger as fuel for focus. There are emotions that society has taught us to fear. Anger is one of them. Since we were little, we have been taught that feeling angry is wrong, that showing it is a sign of lack of control, that we need to swallow it, hide it, keep it quiet. But what few understand is that anger, when understood, is not an enemy. It is a force, a raw, living energy, ready to be transformed into conscious movement. Napoleon Hill understood this. He learned to redirect his anger, and in doing so, he found a type of emotional discipline that many never achieve. Anger is not the absence of love. Anger is the cry of the soul in the face of injustice, limitations, and unwelcome pain. It is the inner fire that arises when something is not in harmony with its essence. And like all fire, it can burn or illuminate. It can destroy or warm. It all depends on who holds it. Hill did not deny his anger. He observed it. He felt it. And then he gave it a purpose. He understood that channeling this energy toward a clear goal was one of the most powerful forms of inner alignment. Instead of exploding, he wrote. Instead of attacking, he structured. Instead of getting lost in resentment, he redirected this emotion to create mental clarity. Anger stopped being a prison and became a driving force. Many fail in this practice because they believe that channeling emotions is the same as repressing them, but it is not. Repressing is silencing, redirecting is listening, and choosing. It is like taking a strong current and putting it in a dam that generates energy. The strength is still there, but now it's in the service of creation. Hill's emotional discipline wasn't rigidity, it was presence. It was a daily commitment to not react automatically, to feel without being overwhelmed, to use the energy of emotion to fuel purpose. When he felt anger, he would ask, "What is this trying to show me? What inside me is asking for change, for respect, for truth?" And then, with that clarity, he would act. Not on impulse, but with direction. You can see this in your own life, too. Think about the times when your anger came as a wake-up call, as a call for boundaries, as a spark that indicated something was out of place. The problem was never feeling. The problem is getting lost in the feeling. It's being driven by it, without awareness. Hill teaches us that anger, when honored and guided, can become focus. It can become determination. It can become vision. This is one of the most hidden keys to emotional control, the ability to embrace what is intense and transform it into direction. Because every emotion carries energy, and all energy can be transmuted. When you learn to do this with anger, you no longer fear it, you listen to it. And in this inner silence between feeling and acting, true power is born. The trap of seeking silent approval through self-control. Many people pride themselves on their self-control, on their silence in the face of provocation, on their forced calm in the face of conflict, on their ability to not show what's going on inside. But behind this apparent strength, there is often an invisible prison hidden, the silent need to be accepted, the need to be seen as evolved, balanced, unshakable. Self-control in this context ceases to be a practice of consciousness and becomes an emotional performance. Napoleon Hill understood that true self-mastery is not about appearing calm, but about being aligned. And alignment has nothing to do with appearance. It has to do with inner truth. Many people, without realizing it, start using emotional control as a way to gain respect, admiration, or even love. But the price is high, because every time you repress who you are to fit into someone else's expectations, you disconnect from your essence. There is a subtle trap in spirituality, the spiritualized ego, the one that doesn't shout, but judges in silence. That doesn't explode, but feels superior because of its apparent serenity. That doesn't show emotion, because it's afraid of appearing weak. And so, self-control stops being a bridge to peace and becomes a golden prison. On the outside, everything seems in harmony. On the inside, there is an undeclared war, a war between what one feels and what one believes one should feel. Hill was confronted by this countless times. He also sought recognition. He also wanted to be admired for his inner strength. But at some point, he realized that true power is not in how others see you, but in how you feel when no one is looking. He understood that controlling emotions to please or impress is a subtle form of self-abandonment. And that real peace only comes when there is permission to be whole, even imperfect, even vulnerable. When self-control is born from the need for approval, it generates tension, it generates fear of failure, it generates a constant feeling of inadequacy, because the focus is always outside, it is always in the eyes of others. But when emotional control is born from presence, it is light, it is silent, it is true. You are not trying to prove anything. You are just being, feeling, choosing consciously. Liberation begins when you realize that you do not need to prove balance, when you understand that your evolution is not measured by how much you hold, but by how much you can feel, without losing yourself. Self-control is not a spiritual showcase. It is an internal space of stillness where each emotion is welcomed and then directed. When this truth takes hold, the search for approval ceases, and in its place, freedom is born, the freedom to be whole, without masks, without the need to appear to be anything, just being. And that is what truly transforms. The paradox of silence, how it strengthens or sabotages your frequency. Silence can be a refuge or a prison. It can be sacred or suffocating. It depends on its origin. It depends on the intention behind it. There are silences that heal, that connect, that reorganize the internal vibration. But there is also silence that represses, that hides, that accumulates pain. And this difference, although invisible, completely changes your energy field. Napoleon Hill discovered the power of silence early on, but he also realized how dangerous it can become when it is born of fear. From the fear of speaking, from the fear of feeling, from the fear of displeasing. Many people silence their emotions not out of wisdom, but out of trauma, out of fatigue, because they don't know how to express themselves without being judged. And so silence ceases to be a space for alignment and becomes a repository of unresolved tensions. The vibration of repression is dense. Even when no one listens to your thoughts, the universe listens to your frequency. The body also listens, and it begins to somatize. The mind, unable to find an outlet, intensifies the internal noises. You seem calm on the outside, but you are at war on the inside. This is the paradox. The same absence of words that can heal you can also make you sick. Hill, when studying the human mind and its layers, understood that true silence is active. It is not absence. It is expanded presence. It is the space where you listen without judgment, where you welcome without reacting. It is a silence that does not hide the emotion, but that listens to it deeply, that allows it to reveal itself without haste, without demands, without excessive control. For many, silence was taught as a form of obedience, of containment, of survival. But there is another type of silence, the one that is born from a peaceful heart, from a body that has learned to listen to itself, of the spirit that has found a resting point. This silence does not suffocate. It breathes, it releases, it purifies the frequency. And in this frequency, your reality begins to reorganize itself. The key is in self-listening, in creating moments, however brief, where you sit with yourself and simply observe, not as someone who expects answers, but as someone who offers space. Because it is in this space that the accumulated tension begins to dissolve. The vibrational field readjusts, and what was once chaos begins to align with the natural flow of life. Silence, when respected, is a medicine, but when imposed, it is a slow poison. Napoleon Hill did not run away from the internal noise. He immersed himself in it with the awareness of someone who knows that everything that is seen can be transformed. And perhaps this is what is missing in many spiritual journeys: the courage to listen deeply, without trying to solve everything immediately. Just listen, because there is wisdom that only emerges when the noise stops, and the heart learns to hear what the mind does not yet understand. Why most people fail when trying to control their mind. Controlling the mind is one of the most desired promises by those who awaken spiritually. The idea of silencing thoughts, maintaining focus, living with presence. But what few admit is that, despite so much effort, most fail. Not for lack of will, not for lack of faith, but for lack of internal structure, for lack of clarity, for not understanding that controlling the mind is not forcing it into silence, but directing it with intention. The mind is like a compass without a north when it is disconnected from its purpose. It wanders, it repeats, it reacts. And every mind that does not find a coherent system of thought ends up becoming hostage to the most intense emotion. You try to focus, but anxiety takes over. You want to meditate, but thoughts multiply. You desire peace, but internal chaos speaks louder. And this does not happen because of weakness. It happens because of lack of vibrational training. Napoleon Hill was one of the first to understand that the mind needs clear direction, a mission, a reason that transcends the present. Because a mind without purpose lives on the run, escape from the past, escape from fear, escape from emptiness, and in this escape, it loses connection with the present, with the frequency of creation. Hill knew that mental control begins with clarity about what you want to be, not just with what you want to avoid. People fail because they try to tame the mind as if it were an enemy, as if it were necessary to defeat it with force. But the mind is not an enemy. It is an unruly child. And like every child, it needs direction, presence, repetition. You do not force silence. You cultivate silence. You do not impose focus. You nurture focus. And this requires practice, ritual, rhythm. The structure that sustains a balanced mind is made of simple but constant choices. It is made of ritualistic silence, of written intentions, of words that vibrate with what you want to manifest. It is made of conscious pauses in the middle of the day, of breathing that reconnects. Because controlling the mind is not about silencing it. It is about training it to return to the now, returning to purpose, returning to what really matters. The uncontrolled mind clings to fear, to urgency, to what is missing. The aligned mind anchors itself in clarity, in presence, in truth. And this is a choice that is renewed every day, because emotional control does not begin with emotions. It begins in the mind that learns not to get lost in old stories. It begins in the mind that accepts, but does not identify, that observes, but does not imprison itself. Napoleon Hill spoke about a system of thought, a way of organizing the mind around a defined purpose. Because where there is direction, there is order. And where there is order, emotional chaos begins to lose strength. This is one of the greatest lessons he left us. That controlling the mind is not a task of brute force. It is a practice of love. Love for yourself. Love for your own frequency. Love for what you are becoming, even when everything seems uncertain. And it is at this point that true control begins to emerge. Spiritual neuroscience of emotional control. There is a meeting point between science and spirituality that, when understood, transforms the way we feel, think, and express ourselves. This point is the understanding that emotions are not just subjective reactions. They are biochemical, electrical, vibrational, and controlling emotions is not just an effort of will. It is a refinement of the nervous system. It is a tuning between body, mind, and consciousness. The prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain responsible for the conscious regulation of emotions. It is where our ability to observe instead of reacting is located, to choose instead of repeating. And when this region is strengthened, the person stops being a slave to the most intense emotion. They start to have choice. But this strengthening does not happen by chance. It is cultivated. It is trained through practices that integrate presence, breathing, and intention. Napoleon Hill understood that the power to direct thoughts began with the vibrational control of emotion. He did not have access to the magnetic resonance images that we have today, but he knew that the body obeyed the mind, and the mind obeyed the dominant emotion, and the dominant emotion was shaped by the vibration with which one lived. It was a cycle, a circuit between thinking, feeling, and acting, and Hill understood how to reconfigure this circuit. Today, neuroscience proves what spiritual masters have always said. The heart has its own electromagnetic field. It sends more signals to the brain than the brain sends to it. And breathing, especially conscious breathing, is a direct bridge between the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex. In other words, when you breathe with presence, you don't just calm down, you reprogram, you change your frequency. This is not a philosophical concept. It is a bioenergetic reality. The way you breathe changes your heart rate variability, which in turn changes your emotional stability. A short, anxious breath keeps the body alert. A deep, rhythmic breath tells the brain that it is safe to relax. And when the body relaxes, the mind opens to new choices. It is in this state that transformation happens. Napoleon Hill, even without the terms of modern neuroscience, used mental discipline as a way to change his vibrational state. He knew that to access higher ideas, he needed to be in a more refined emotional field. That anger and fear block creativity. That doubt and haste obscure intuition. And that is why he sought practices that would elevate his base emotion, because the mind only obeys effectively when emotion is coherent. This is spiritual neuroscience, a path where spirituality ceases to be an abstraction and becomes an integrated practice, where emotion is no longer seen as an enemy but as a messenger, where emotional control is not repression but vibrational sophistication. You do not silence anger, you listen to it and guide it. You do not run away from fear, you go through it with presence. And in this process, the brain learns. The body learns, energy reconfigures itself, and reality begins to respond differently. Hill's mental model: what you think, you feel, and what you feel, you manifest. In his most profound work, Napoleon Hill revealed a truth that goes far beyond superficial motivation, that thought, emotion, and action are not separate elements, but a vibrational triad that shapes reality. For Hill, the mind is the first workshop where destiny is sculpted. But this mind does not operate in a vacuum. It responds to what you feel. And what you feel defines what you emanate. And what you emanate returns to you as form, circumstance, and experience. Thinking positively is not enough if the feeling that sustains this thought is out of alignment. You can affirm, "I am prosperous." But if scarcity, fear, or worthlessness vibrate within you, the reality that manifests will be consistent with this vibration, and not with the words that come out of your mouth. Hill understood that the universe does not respond only to the idea. It responds to the vibration behind the idea. And vibration is born from the coherence between what you think and what you feel. This is why so many fail on the path of manifestation, because they focus on thoughts without first taking care of the emotional field. They want to change reality only through logic, ignoring that the body, energy, and feeling are the true transmitters of intention. Thought is the command. Emotion is the engine. Action is the step. When these three align, something happens. Reality begins to respond. Hill's technique for nurturing this alignment was simple but powerful. Every day he wrote his intentions, not as a mechanical exercise, but as a vibrational practice. He wrote with presence, with feeling. He visualized the outcome. He felt as if it were already happening. And he repeated this until the body believed it. Because when the body believes, the frequency changes. And when the frequency changes, everything changes. This conscious writing of intentions is not about wish lists. It is about energetic declaration. It is about taking on, in felt words, what you are ready to become. It is writing not what you want, but what you already are, in essence. Because the universe responds to the state of being, not the state of lack. Hill knew this. And that is why he said, "What you think, you feel. What you feel, you manifest." It is a vibrational law. Simple, relentless, profound. Most people try to skip steps. They try to act without first aligning. They try to vibrate prosperity while still cultivating fear. But true manifestation requires presence. It requires emotional alignment. And this is the basis of Hill's mental model, that the mind, when aligned with the heart, becomes a powerful antenna. An antenna that not only captures, but emits, that not only desires, but creates. And it is in this field of vibrational coherence that silent miracles begin to happen. The car metaphor, your mind as a vehicle, your emotions as fuel. Imagine your mind as a vehicle, a silent, powerful car, full of possibilities. But this car, no matter how modern it may be, won't go anywhere without fuel. And the fuel, in this case, is emotions. They are what drive thought. They are what fuel desire. They are what drive action. The question that changes everything is, who is driving? Napoleon Hill understood this metaphor clearly. He knew that emotion without direction is like accelerating without a destination. It is movement, but without purpose. It is energy, but without awareness. And this, instead of creating, consumes. Instead of elevating, it wears you down. Most people live like this, letting the most intense emotion, be it fear, anger, guilt, or anxiety, take the wheel. And when that happens, the car of life goes to dark places, repetitive places, places of pain. Emotional control, in this metaphor, is not about braking suddenly or turning off the engine. It is about taking the wheel. It is recognizing that yes, there is a tank full of emotions inside you, but that the one who decides the direction is consciousness. Hill trained his mind to do this, to observe the emotion arising, and instead of reacting, to choose the path that was aligned with his purpose, to choose the highest response, not the most immediate one. This is the great mistake of many superficial teachings about self-control, thinking that control is blocking, that domination is suppression, but control is not rigidity. It is direction. It is knowing how to guide your own emotional flow without denying its strength. It is keeping your hands firmly on the steering wheel while the world changes around you. It is adjusting the route without losing focus. And this is only possible when you understand the power of emotions without becoming hostage to them. When Hill used this metaphor, he was not talking about a linear path, without curves or unexpected events. He knew that the road of life is full of surprises, but he also knew that if the right emotion was in the tank and the right consciousness was at the wheel, then any destination could be reached, not by rushing, but by being present, not by denying, but by integrating. Think about your life. How many times have you handed over the steering wheel to anger, to fear, to fatigue? And now imagine what it would be like to take back control, not to run away from the emotion, but to drive with it, to transform it into fuel for expansion. This is the essence of conscious emotional control, an internal movement that does not cancel out the feeling, but that decides where to go with what you feel. And it is in this intimate, serene, and firm driving that the journey begins to make sense, because you stop being a passenger in your own story, and you become the driver, not aggressively, but with lightness, with direction, with clarity, and with the silent certainty that each emotion, when guided with consciousness, takes you closer to yourself. True story. The emotional breakdown that forced Hill to rebuild himself. Strength does not always come from balance. Sometimes it comes from breaking, from a breakdown so deep that it leaves no other choice but to rebuild. Napoleon Hill, before becoming one of the most respected names in the philosophy of success, went through a dark valley, a period in which everything seemed to be falling apart, and not because of external weakness, but because of an internal shock, because of a silent, emotional exhaustion, because of a pain that could no longer be ignored. During the most intense phase of his research and work, Hill received death threats. His integrity, his mission, his life were at risk. The pressure was mounting, the fear was growing, and as many do, he tried to maintain control. He tried to move forward, to keep up the pace, to appear unshakable. But his body spoke, his soul screamed, and one day he could no longer do it. The fall came, the emotional bankruptcy, the emptiness, the forced silence. And within that silence, a question: who am I, beyond what I do? It was at that moment that Hill began his true transformation. He did not seek ready-made answers. He sought rediscovery of purpose, rediscovery of faith, rediscovering the emotion that he had neglected for so long. Because even the wise forget to feel. Even the strong get lost, trying to carry everything alone. And it was in this collapse that he saw that the pain was not the end. It was the beginning of something greater. He began to understand that emotional control was not about never falling. It was about learning to get up with more awareness. It was about feeling the pain without clinging to it. About accepting chaos as an invitation to realignment. Hill looked at his own darkness with new eyes, and he saw there not a mistake, but a portal of restarting, of purification, of polishing. From this experience, he became more compassionate, deeper, more human. His philosophy gained another dimension. It stopped being just mental and became vibrational, because he understood firsthand that the mind does not command alone, that the spirit, when ignored, demands its presence. And that emotion, when repressed, finds ways to attract attention, sometimes with pain, sometimes with crisis, but always with a call. This true story reminds us that the path of consciousness is not linear, and that emotional control is not a straight line. It is a cycle, a process, a constant invitation to listen, adjust, and start over. And, most importantly, to understand that there is no shame in falling. The shame would be not allowing this fall to take you to a truer place, a deeper place, a place that is more yours. And that is exactly what Hill did. He fell, but he didn't stay down. He rebuilt himself. And with that, he showed that true power is not in avoiding pain, but in going through it with purpose. And come back, more whole, more lucid, more alive. The Invisible Counsel Technique. How to reprogram your mind with emotional archetypes. In moments of doubt, loneliness, or misalignment, the human mind seeks reference. It cries out for direction, for inspiration, for a presence that reminds it of who it can be. Napoleon Hill, understanding this deep need for internal guidance, developed a simple and, at the same time, deeply mystical practice. He called it the Invisible Counsel. And with it, he not only reconfigured his psyche, but also accessed more subtle dimensions of his own consciousness. The technique was clear. Hill would mentally place himself in an imaginary room, and there, around a table, he would sit with minds he admired, men and women who, in his vision, carried elevated virtues. Abraham Lincoln, Thomas Edison, Andrew Carnegie, and in silence, he would listen to them. He would observe them. He would let them speak through the inner silence. These encounters were not fantasies. They were archetypal constructions. They were symbolic activations of his higher unconscious, because by connecting with these figures, Hill accessed latent aspects of himself that needed to be awakened. Modern neuroscience calls this mental simulation. Spirituality calls it vibrational connection, and both paths say the same thing. The mind does not distinguish what is intensely imagined from what is lived. When you project yourself into a symbolic space and relate to archetypes of wisdom, courage, compassion, or clarity, you activate these qualities within yourself. You train your brain to vibrate at new emotional frequencies. You reprogram. Hill's Invisible Counsel was not just a creative exercise. It was a vibrational ritual. It was a reunion with dormant inner forces. It was proof that even in moments of isolation, there is a secret room within each human being where the greatest masters in history can be summoned, not to bring ready-made answers, but to remind you who you already are, inside. This practice reminds us of something essential, that all the virtues you admire in others already exist in you. Lincoln's courage, Edison's vision, Carnegie's persistence, all of these live somewhere within your soul. And by evoking them in your imagination, you invite these aspects to emerge. You allow the frequency of these qualities to become accessible, sensitive, real. Hill used the invisible counsel to make decisions, to refocus, to find strength in moments of uncertainty, and above all, to remember his mission. Because what this exercise offers is not just inspiration, it is a vibrational state of alignment. It is a change in frequency that reorganizes the mind, calms the heart, and clears the path. The mind, when nourished with elevated symbols, transforms. And this transformation is not magical. It is intentional. It is vibrational. It is spiritual. When you visit this inner room of wisdom, you access something that cannot be found in books, in ready-made phrases, or in motivational speeches. You access your essential truth. And in this silent, wordless encounter, you return to the world more lucid, more whole, more you. The mirror effect. What your irritation with others reveals about you. There are emotions that seem to originate from others. Irritation, judgment, impatience. They arise as automatic responses to other people's attitudes. But when observed in depth, these emotions reveal something more intimate, more hidden, more yours. What you judge in others is often a reflection of what you have not yet accepted within yourself. What hurts you reveals where there is still an unhealed wound. And what bothers you points to what still needs to be seen with greater awareness. Napoleon Hill understood that every external experience is a vibrational mirror, that the world around you not only reacts to your energy, but also reflects it. This does not mean that you are to blame for everything that happens, but it does mean that your frequency attracts, activates, and tunes into certain patterns. And these patterns are invitations to lucidity, invitations to integration. When you get angry with someone, your first reaction is to justify yourself. He's wrong. She disrespected me. That shouldn't have happened. But what if for a moment you reversed the question? What if, instead of pointing outward, you asked, why does this affect me so much? What inside me feels invaded, rejected, or disrespected? Where in my history have I felt something similar? These questions are not meant to generate guilt. They are meant to bring light. Neville Goddard taught that imagination has the power to review the past and reconfigure the present, that you can mentally return to a painful scene and give it vibrational meaning. It's not about changing the facts. It's about changing the energetic impact that those facts left. Because as long as the memory still vibrates like a wound, you will continue to project pain onto others. You will continue to react. You will continue to hurt, and hurt yourself. The technique of revised imagination, according to Neville, is simple, but profound. You return in your mind to that situation that activated a dense emotion, and there, with presence, you visualize the outcome you would have liked to have experienced. You imagine the scene being guided by compassion, understanding, and peace. And as you do so, something changes. The vibration associated with that memory begins to transform, and with it, your reaction to similar situations also changes. Napoleon Hill, although using a different language, did the same. He reviewed his reactions. He observed where there were still repetitive patterns, and with intention, he trained his mind to respond differently. Because he knew that as long as irritation with the other dictated his frequency, he would be trapped in a vibrational cycle where the power would always be outside. And for those who wish to dominate their own mind, this is no longer acceptable. The mirror is uncomfortable. It shows you what you might prefer not to see, but it is also liberating, because everything that is revealed can be healed, and everything that is healed stops repeating itself. So, the next time something or someone touches your limit, remember, maybe there is not an aggressor there. Maybe there is a messenger, a reflection, a silent invitation to reconnect with a part of you that is still waiting to be welcomed. And by accepting this invitation, you become not only more aware, but more whole, freer, more at peace. The hidden circuit of emotional self-sabotage. There are patterns that repeat themselves without you realizing it. Emotional cycles that return, even after promises of change. It is as if a part of you is stuck in an old script, in a silent programming that every now and then takes control and takes you back to the same place. Napoleon Hill called this the hidden circuit, a subconscious structure that, if not reinterpreted, continues to operate in the background, guiding decisions, sabotaging relationships, draining energy. This circuit is built throughout life, through experiences of pain, rejection, humiliation, abandonment. The mind, to protect itself, creates automatic responses. But time passes, and these responses continue, even when they are no longer necessary, even when they cause more pain than protection. And the most treacherous thing is that they act in silence, through thoughts that seem like yours, but aren't, through emotions that arise without warning, through choices that don't make sense in the light of consciousness. Hill understood that self-sabotage is not a character flaw. It's a vibrational reflex. It's the result of an unintegrated emotional field. When trauma becomes identity, you don't recognize yourself outside of the pain. You get used to the suffering. You get used to the chaos. And you start to confuse imbalance with familiarity. You start to sabotage yourself, not out of malice, but because you don't know how to live outside of that pattern. Breaking this cycle requires more than willpower. It requires presence. It requires courage to observe, with lucidity and compassion, the roots of one's own pain. It requires a willingness to reprogram. And this reprogramming is not theoretical. It is vibrational. It happens in the body, in the breathing, in the visualization, in the language you use with yourself. One of the most powerful tools for this are conscious affirmations, but not as phrases repeated mechanically, rather as vibrational statements felt. Short phrases, integrated with breathing and somatic visualization. You breathe in, affirm, visualize. You imagine yourself living the opposite of the sabotaging pattern. And over time, this image becomes familiar. This vibration becomes safe. And the brain learns. The body accepts. The energy rises. Napoleon Hill knew that the mind could be trained, that the intentional repetition of images, words, and sensations could create a new vibrational pattern. He did not ignore the pain. He reframed it. He reintegrated it as fuel for transformation. Because every circuit, no matter how old, can be reconfigured when there is clear intention, when there is truth, when there is frequency. Self-sabotage is not an end. It is an invitation. A sign that something inside you is ready to be reviewed. It is asking for a new path. And when this request is heard, something changes. The cycle breaks. The energy is released. And you finally begin to walk a path that was not designed by pain, but by consciousness, by choice, by presence, by the truth of the being that you are becoming. The pain of holding back all the time. The body demands what the soul silences. There is a type of exhaustion that does not come from work, nor from routine, nor from visible problems. It is a deeper tiredness, a weight that cannot be explained in simple words. It is the weight of holding back all the time, of swallowing emotions to maintain appearances, of smiling when your chest wants to cry, of controlling every word, every gesture, every impulse, so as not to disappoint, not to seem fragile, not to lose control. Napoleon Hill understood that true emotional control cannot be confused with continuous repression, because everything you try to silence continues to vibrate, and everything that vibrates manifests itself, sooner or later, in the body. A symptom, a pain with no apparent cause, a persistent tightness in the stomach, a tension that does not give in. The body demands what the soul silences, and this demand, if ignored, will intensify until you need to stop, breathe, feel. Many people live this restraint as if it were a virtue, as if self-control meant always being calm, always at peace, always serene. But this is not peace, it is suffocation. True peace does not require effort to be maintained. It is born from coherence, from the alignment between what you feel, what you think, and what you express. When you need to restrain yourself all the time, it is because you are betraying yourself on some level. The body is honest. It does not know how to lie. It expresses what the mind tries to hide. And when emotion is denied for too long, it seeks a way out, sometimes through crises, other times through illness, but always with a silent request: feel me, look at me, let me pass. Emotion only transforms when it is accepted, when it is welcomed, when it is treated as part of the process and not as an enemy. Authenticity is not saying everything you think. It is feeling everything you feel, truthfully. It is not doing violence to yourself in the name of image. It is not sacrificing your soul to fit into the expectations of others. Hill, as he deepened his inner journey, understood that maintaining the appearance of balance was not the same as living in balance, and he chose a new path, that of sincere presence, that of deep listening, that of silent truth that does not need to be defended. The path to healthy self-control is, above all, the path of authenticity. It is the balance between expression and restraint. It is knowing when to be silent and knowing when to let go. It is allowing yourself to be whole, even when that means showing vulnerability, because there is no weakness in feeling. There is strength in acknowledging what one feels. And even more, there is freedom in no longer needing to hide anything. When the soul is heard, the body breathes. When the truth is told, the energy aligns. When feeling is authorized, the flow is reestablished, and what was once tension becomes a path. What was once a burden becomes learning. What was once pain becomes direction. And in this silent and profound process, the being returns to its center, not to control everything, but to live in truth, in peace, in real presence. Beware of emotional addiction. Your mind may be addicted to suffering. Not all suffering is a conscious choice, but much of it is sustained by invisible habits. There are pains that are repeated, not because you want to feel them, but because your body, mind, and frequency have become accustomed to them. Napoleon Hill intuited something that neuroscience now confirms. Negative emotions, when fed for a long time, become addictive. They shape neural pathways. They create automatic routes in the brain. And even when you try to change, something inside you pulls you back to the old pattern. Joe Dispenza describes this clearly. The body, over time, becomes the mind itself. In other words, the chemistry of fear, sadness, anger, guilt, if repeated continuously, becomes familiar. And everything that is familiar, even if destructive, is perceived as safe. The mind addicted to suffering creates narratives, images, behaviors that keep the cycle alive. And the most challenging thing is that this cycle can seem normal, part of your identity, part of your story. It's like waking up every day, and before you even have a conscious thought, you already feel the weight of anxiety, the knot of insecurity, the void of demotivation. Not because something happened, but because your body has learned to stay in that state. Because this emotion has become routine, and every habit repeats itself until it is interrupted with presence. Hill realized that the way out of this cycle was not to deny the pain, but to interrupt the vibrational addiction. And to do this, he began to modify his internal narrative, to change the words he said to himself, to transform his mornings into rituals of intention, and, most importantly, to breathe differently. Breathing, simple, constant, neglected, is a key, because it communicates to the nervous system that it is possible to relax, that it is safe to be at peace. The emotional interruption technique is simple, but it requires discipline. It consists of 3 steps. First, you recognize the pattern. You name the emotion. You bring light to what was once automatic. Then, you breathe deeply, 3 times, with awareness, allowing the body to begin to dissolve the chemistry of habit. And finally, you restructure the narrative. Change the image. Change the phrase. Change the direction of thought. Not as an escape, but as a vibrational repositioning. Little by little, this new cycle begins to settle in. The body begins to seek new emotions. the mind begins to find new paths. The frequency rises, and with it, the reality around you begins to respond differently, because emotional addiction is not a destiny, it is a repetition, and every repetition can be broken when there is presence, when there is intention, when there is truth. Hill did not romanticize suffering. He transformed it. He transmuted it. He observed it as a reminder that the mind needs direction, the body needs rest, and the soul needs reconnection. And this reconnection begins when you choose, consciously, to no longer feed what consumes you. When you decide, with silent firmness, to free yourself from what holds you back, and create space for that which truly nourishes, sustains, elevates, transforms. Why you never attract what you want. When you're trying to appear calm, there's a kind of spiritual effort that's so subtle that it masquerades as calm. You say you're fine, that you're at peace, that you're vibrating high. But deep down, your body is on alert, your heart is restless, your mind is in overdrive. Because behind that appearance of calm, there's still fear, there's still urgency, there's still the attempt to control the uncontrollable. And the universe, which responds to the real vibration and not the energetic mask, keeps returning what you're trying to hide. Napoleon Hill observed that true manifestation isn't born of pretense, it's born of vibrational coherence. And coherence isn't about keeping a smile on your face, it's about truly feeling what you claim to be. When you try to appear calm, but inside you're vibrating scarcity, despair, or frustration, your heart's magnetic field emits that hidden frequency. And what comes back to you is more of the same vibration. The universe does not listen to your words. It feels your frequency. And this frequency is defined not by what you pretend, but by what you live in silence. By what you feel when no one is looking. By what your body still holds, even if your mind says otherwise. This is why so many, even when doing everything right spiritually, still feel blocked. Because they do it with technique, but not with truth. The desire to attract something new starts from a powerful premise, the recognition that there is a space to be filled. But if this recognition is covered by denial, by disguise, by self-demand, this space remains closed. You need to open it. Breathe. Feel. Allow yourself to experience the emotion that is still there, and only then, choose a new, vibrational state. Hill spoke of alignment, and alignment is accepting where you are, without resisting, and then choosing where you want to go. It is recognizing that you still feel pain, fear, insecurity, without clinging to it, without transforming it into an identity. Because true peace does not need to seem like anything, it just is. And when it is real, it vibrates, it radiates, and then the universe responds. Attempting to appear calm when you are not is like painting a cracked wall. The illusion doesn't last long. The crack remains, and the magnetic field remains unstable. But when you have the courage to look at the crack, to touch the pain, to feel the real vibration, something starts to change. Because healing begins with truth, with vulnerability, with the willingness to let go of the image, to rediscover the essence. What you want to attract is already available, but it only arrives when it finds space, when it finds coherence, when it finds truth. Napoleon Hill understood this deeply, and that's why he stopped trying to appear something. He chose to be. He chose to vibrate with presence, with authenticity, with purpose. And that choice transformed his life, and it can transform yours too. When you stop pretending to be at peace and start living at peace from the inside out, without effort, without disguise, with soul, with truth, with vibration, transmutation exercise. Write your pain as emotional strength. There are times when pain seems too great to be carried in silence. It pulsates, it weighs, it insists. But what if this same pain could be transformed? What if it were not an obstacle, but a lever? Napoleon Hill understood that emotions are not problems to be solved, but energies to be redirected. And one of his most powerful practices was precisely this, writing down his pain, not to lament, but to transmute. Hill kept a diary, but not an ordinary diary. It was a space where he poured out what he felt with all his intensity. He wrote down his anger, his frustration, his fears, his doubts. And when he put it on paper, something began to happen. What had previously been internal chaos took shape. It gained clarity. It gained the possibility of resignification. He did not write to victimize himself. He wrote to release, to observe, to transform. This process of conscious writing is a portal. When you write with presence, you access parts of yourself that were hidden. It gives a name to what was just vibrating in silence. And when something is named, it can be transformed. It can be welcomed. It can be directed. Because the written word, when connected to emotion, is an act of creation, a healing ritual. Hill trained his mind from these pages. He didn't deny what he felt. He translated it. He took the fire of anger and converted it into focus. He took the weight of anguish and transformed it into clarity of purpose. He took fear and redesigned it as an action plan. Writing was the space where he polished his emotional energy, and in doing so, he reprogrammed his vibrational field. This type of practice is much more than just venting. It's an exercise in transmutation. You put raw emotion on paper, and then observe, rewrite, reformulate. Ask, what force is hidden here? What is this pain trying to show me about myself? How can I transform this vibration into direction, into decision, into growth? These questions are not for the mind to answer, but for the body to feel. When you access this depth, something changes. Pain stops being a burden and becomes a teacher, a sign, a path. Hill knew this, and it was with this silent ritual of emotional writing that he got through the most difficult periods of his life, because he understood that pain is not the end. It is raw material for awakening. It is energy waiting for a new destiny. And when you conduct it with awareness, it stops controlling you and starts serving you, silently, powerfully, deeply. Time and self-control. Why you need to stop rushing your evolution. There is an anxiety disguised as spirituality, a desire to accelerate awakening, to master the mind as quickly as possible, to achieve peace, balance, abundance, as if the soul had deadlines, as if evolution were a race. Napoleon Hill realized that this haste is not a sign of commitment, it is a sign of distrust. Distrust of the process, distrust of time, distrust of oneself. True emotional discipline is not born of urgency. It is born of active patience, of the silent presence that recognizes that each phase has a purpose, that the seed does not germinate faster because you observe it, that the cycle does not hurry because you insist. Hill understood this deeply when studying human behavior. He saw that desperation for change often blocks change, because where there is tension, there is contraction, and where there is contraction, energy does not flow. The metaphor of the Chinese bamboo reveals this wisdom beautifully. During the first few years after it is planted, nothing seems to happen. No leaves, no visible signs of growth, but deep roots are being formed underground. An invisible structure is being built, and only after years, the bamboo grows. Fast, strong, aligned. It didn't grow suddenly, it grew at the right time, after taking root. The same is true of the inner journey. There are periods when everything seems to stand still, when the silence is dense, when nothing manifests, and you wonder if you're doing something wrong. But you're not. You're putting down roots. You're strengthening internal structures that will support you when growth comes. And it will come, but not by imposition. It will come because the vibration is ready, because you're whole. True emotional control is not an effort to be better quickly. It's the art of trusting the soul's timing. It's surrendering to the rhythm of life. Hill knew that rushing the mind puts the emotion on alert. It's generating even more noise. It's vibrating at the frequency of demand. And at that frequency, the flow closes off. What could arrive lightly encounters invisible barriers. When you stop trying to rush your evolution, you finally begin to evolve, because it leaves the state of urgency and enters the state of presence. And it is in presence that energy is organized, that intuition speaks, that emotion stabilizes, that the path is shown. Hill did not want immediate results. He wanted real results. And that takes time. Time to cultivate. Time to mature. Time to take root. Active patience is the kind that does not give up, but also does not force. That does what needs to be done, and then trusts. That plants, and then breathes. That nourishes, and then observes. Because the soul has its own rhythm, and when you respect this rhythm, you begin to live in tune with something greater, with the natural flow of life, with the silent wisdom of time. And in this silence, everything blooms, everything matures, everything reveals itself. In the right time, in the right space, in the right vibration. How emotional self-discipline shapes your electromagnetic field. The energy you emit is not only the result of what you feel, it is also the result of how much you can sustain this vibration continuously, not in passing emotional peaks, but in stable, silent, rooted internal states. Napoleon Hill discovered that the key to this state was not in the brute force of will, but in emotional discipline, in the constancy of those who understand that their frequency needs to be cultivated like a garden. Greg Braden, when exploring the mysteries between science and spirituality, showed that the heart and the brain are in constant electromagnetic dialogue, that the coherence between them generates a field of balance, of attraction, of clarity, and that this field can be measured. It is real, it is alive, and it changes according to the predominant emotion. If there is fear, the field contracts. If there is gratitude, it expands. If there is clear intention sustained by elevated emotion, the field becomes magnetic. It creates reality. Hill did not use these technical terms, but he intuited the same principle. He knew that a focused mind, guided by a high purpose and fed by noble emotions, became a field of powerful creation, and that this creation was not accidental. It was built, day after day, through simple practices, repetitive, intentional. Emotional self-discipline for Hill was like a bridge between the invisible world of vibration and the visible world of achievement. But it is important to understand that discipline is not rigidity. It is not self-judgment. It is a form of love. Love that organizes, that guides, that commits to vibrational truth, that chooses, even on difficult days, to keep the vibration in tune with what one wants to experience, not as a forced effort, but as a sacred practice. Hill created rituals, small habits that shaped his frequency, daily writing of intentions, reading affirmations with emotion, conscious silences in the early morning, heartfelt visualizations. He understood that his field was not shaped by big events, but by small gestures repeated with soul. And that is where true strength is born, in repetition, with presence, in the intention maintained even in the midst of chaos. This is the power of emotional self-discipline. It does not turn you into someone cold. On the contrary, it warms you with clarity. It stabilizes you with purpose. It connects you with the vibration of what you want to attract. And more than attracting, it prepares you to receive. Because the universe does not deliver what you desire. It delivers what you are ready to sustain. And you only sustain what already vibrates within you. Hill understood this deeply. That's why he didn't seek miracles. He cultivated frequency. And in this silent cultivation, he shaped his reality, not by luck, not by chance, but by vibrational coherence, by harmony between heart, mind, and action. And this harmony is the true field of creation, where the invisible becomes visible, where the internal becomes reality, where being meets doing, and doing reveals having, in peace, in flow, in truth. The fallacy of total control. True strength lies in conscious surrender. Emotional control is often confused with the illusion of total control. The belief that if you can manage every thought and every emotion, you will be immune to internal storms. But this inflexible search for constant mental vigilance does not generate freedom. It generates tension. It generates exhaustion. Because life does not happen only within your control. It happens within the mystery of the human experience, of what is unpredictable, And it is in this place that true strength is revealed, in conscious surrender. Ralph Waldo Emerson sang about trusting in the flow of life, guided by the inner spirit. This trust, so subtle, is not weakness. It is presence. It is rest. It is practical wisdom. It is the security that comes from knowing that not everything is in your hands, but who, even so, surrenders with a centered body, an open heart, and a conscious mind. Napoleon Hill understood this maturity, that surrendering is not giving up. It is aligning yourself with the greater order without giving up your own vibration. It is allowing yourself to flow without dissolving. The fallacy of total control blinds, because it teaches that the ideal is to suppress chaos. But real life is intermittent, imperfect, unpredictable. And when you accept this with love, everything changes. Discomfort does not paralyze, it informs. Uncertainty does not scare, it teaches. Fluidity does not destabilize, it shapes. And it is in this space, between the control you exercise and the mystery you embrace, that true emotional power takes hold. You won't eliminate fear, or anger, or sadness, but with awareness you can feel them, honor them, and then let them go. You can move through them with presence, without getting lost, without hiding, without judging yourself. Because conscious surrender doesn't erase emotion. It parks it with dignity. It gives it space. And then it allows it to follow its natural course. This is where Napoleon Hill discovered real strength, in the balance between intentional action and surrendering to the flow, in the place where the mind directs and where the soul trusts, in the place where you don't need to be sure of everything, but you have the courage to feel and the wisdom to surrender, with clarity, with respect, with coherence. Emotional control as an applied spiritual practice. When we look back on this entire journey, we realize that emotional control was never about strength. It was never about rigidity. It was never about appearing balanced in the eyes of the world. It was, from the beginning, about presence, about awareness, about the courage to feel what is truly alive within you. It was about integrating, not hiding, about guiding, not suffocating, about transforming, not nullifying. Napoleon Hill did not teach cold techniques. He taught a living philosophy. He understood that emotion is energy in motion, that every emotion, even the densest, carries with it a message, a direction, a possibility of realignment. And that, when welcomed with clear intention, this emotion ceases to be an obstacle and becomes an impulse. It becomes a bridge. It becomes a silent prayer that reorganizes reality. Joe Dispenza confirms this with the clarity of science. Elevated emotion with clear intention creates a new reality. This phrase, so simple, reveals the secret that many have sought for years. You do not need to control everything to manifest a true life. You need to vibrate with truth, with clarity, with coherence. Emotional control, in this sense, is a sacred art. The art of not reacting automatically to what has not yet been understood. The art of listening before responding, of welcoming before denying, of breathing before acting. Spirituality does not require that you always be calm. It asks that you always be present. And this presence, when constant, shapes your frequency. And this frequency shapes your reality. Hill understood that each thought, each emotion, and each vibrational choice, little by little, shapes your destiny. Not as something predetermined, but as something created with consciousness, created with love, created with soul. You are not here to be perfect. You are here to be whole, to feel, learn, transmute, to fall, and get up with more truth, to make mistakes, and choose differently with more consciousness, to discover in the silence of your heart that emotional control is not the end of the journey, but the beginning of a new way of living, a lighter way, more lucid, more deeply connected to who you really are. And if these words touched something in you, maybe it is because your soul already knew, it already felt, it was already ready, ready to stop resisting, ready to stop running, ready to look with affection at everything that still pulses within, and finally begin to live with intention, with peace, with surrender, with soul, with truth, and with a new vibration, because now you no longer need to react. You can choose, you can transmute, you can be in peace, in presence, in profound freedom.